At her husband's funeral, his brother proposed, but a letter she found changed everything. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from today. The sun was low in the sky, shining bright and hot over the fields. A warm wind moved through the tall grass around the graves. The air smelled like fresh dirt. Somewhere close, people were talking in quiet voices. The trees made soft rustling sounds. But to Isabella, everything felt far away, like she was underwater. She stood very still beside an open grave. A simple stone was already placed to show where her husband, Felix, was buried. Her chest felt heavy, and it was hard for her to breathe. Her black dress stuck to her skin because of the hot air. Her hands shook as she held a white lily, Felix's favorite flower. Many people had come. Some were family, some were friends, and some were just there because they felt they had to be. Most of them had light skin and looked like they came from a different world than Isabella. No one said anything, but Isabella felt their eyes on her. They looked at her like she didn't belong. When she got close, they stopped talking. Even though she had been with Felix for many years, raised children with him, and made a life with him, she still felt like a stranger to them. The priest read the final prayers in a soft voice, but Isabella didn't really hear him. She stared at the grave, trying to believe it was real. Just a few days ago, Felix had been laughing at the kitchen table. He had teased her about how she always burned the rice. Just a few days ago, he kissed her on the forehead and said, "You're my home, Isabella." Now he was gone. All that was left was the dirt, the stone, and a quiet so deep it hurt. As the ceremony came to an end, Isabella felt someone move beside her. She turned a little and saw Javier, Felix's younger brother. Javier was tall and wore a nice navy blue suit. His skin was a bit lighter than Isabella's. His blue eyes looked sharp, and he wore a careful, fake smile. He always seemed charming, the kind of person people looked at without him trying. In the past, Isabella had tried to be nice to him, even though his jokes sometimes hurt her, and his compliments made her feel uncomfortable. Now, Javier walked toward her with purpose. His face looked sad, but Isabella didn't trust it. She thought he would say something kind or give her a hug. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone. Right there, in front of everyone. In front of her kids, in front of Felix's parents, Javier got down on one knee. Everything stopped. Isabella felt her heart freeze. People gasped, heads turned. Someone even let out a little laugh, but it stopped quickly. Javier reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black box. He opened it with a quick flick. Inside was a shiny diamond ring. "Isabella," he said loudly, like he was putting on a show, "Felix loved you. He would want you to be safe and not be alone. I promise you, I'll take care of you. Marry me." Isabella couldn't believe what she was seeing or hearing. She stared at him. Her fingers squeezed the lily so hard that it broke. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She felt her face burn red with embarrassment. Everyone was looking at her. Some looked shocked, some felt sorry for her, and some looked like they were enjoying the drama. She thought about Felix just a few feet away under the ground, and for the first time since he died, Isabella felt angry, really angry. She didn't say anything. She turned around and walked away. Her shoes sank into the soft ground. She heard the whispers behind her, but she didn't turn back. She couldn't. If she did, she might not be able to keep walking. Everything around her became a blur. The green grass, the gray stones, the black clothes. Her breaths came fast. She felt like the shame and hurt would crush her. She reached the parking lot, opened the door of her old car, and sat inside. For a few minutes, she just sat there, holding the steering wheel with both hands. Her whole body shook, not from sadness now, but from anger. She had trusted Javier. She had at least thought he would be respectful during this sad time, but instead, he had turned Felix's funeral into a terrible show. He acted like she was something to win, not a person who was hurting. A few minutes later, her daughter Selena got into the car. Her face was pale and she looked confused and embarrassed. "Mom," she said softly, I don't know what that was. I'm so sorry. Isabella shook her head. She didn't blame Selena. She didn't even blame the people who didn't know what to do. She blamed Javier, the man who saw her sadness and tried to use it. Tears filled Isabella's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not here. Not now. She started the car and the engine slowly turned on. She drove away from the cemetery and away from Javier. But in her heart, she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. As they drove back to the big house, Isabella held the steering wheel tightly. She could feel something changing. She knew her family would look at her differently now. Javier had planted a thought in everyone's minds. Now, she would not just be Felix's wife. She would be the woman who was offered help and said no. Back at the house, guests came in slowly. The rooms were filled with soft voices and clinking glasses. Isabella walked around saying thank you and giving small smiles. She saw Javier watching her, always nearby, like a shadow. Later that evening, as the sky grew dark and the stars came out, Isabella stood alone on the back porch. She looked out over the big fields that Felix had loved. The first star twinkled above her. She hugged herself, feeling cold. She was truly alone now, and if she wanted to stay strong through whatever was coming, she would have to find strength inside herself. The sliding door creaked open behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. I meant what I said, Javier's voice came from the doorway. You don't have to do this alone. Isabella closed her eyes. She felt the anger and sadness inside her twist and turn. No, she thought, I won't be alone, but I will never be yours. She didn't answer him. She just walked back into the house and closed the door behind her. The house felt heavy with sadness, but deep inside Isabella, a tiny spark of strength lit up. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to fight. Enough to survive. And one day, enough to take back what was hers. The days after Felix's funeral felt like a dream. Isabella couldn't tell one day from the next. The world outside the house kept going. But inside the house, everything felt stuck and still. She walked around like someone who was sleepwalking. She did small things, nodded at guests, and listened to people say they were sorry. But the sadness of Felix being gone was always with her. At first, it seemed okay that Javier stayed around. He was Felix's only brother. People thought he was grieving too. He walked through the halls, answered calls from faraway family, and told people what was going on. He acted like he was helping. To others, he looked kind and helpful. Isabella tried to believe that too. Maybe he just wanted to help. He stayed close during meetings. He told her to rest while he took care of things. But inside, Isabella felt strange whenever he entered a room. It started with little things. One day, she went to the kitchen to get her laptop. It wasn't there. She found it in Javier's hands. He was using it in the study. I was just organizing some files, he said with a smile. You don't need to worry about this stuff. His words seemed okay, but Isabella felt a chill down her back. She said nothing. She thought maybe she was just being too sensitive. Then, a few days later, a worker showed up to talk about adding a new security system to the house. Isabella didn't call anyone about that. The worker said, Mr. Javier asked me to come. He wants to make sure you're safe. That evening, Isabella asked Javier about it. He laughed and put a hand on her shoulder. Isabella, he said slowly, like she was a child, you have enough to worry about. Let me handle things. His words made her feel sick. It wasn't just about the security system. It was the way he made choices for her, like her voice didn't matter. Worse, she saw how other people in the family started listening to her instead of her. When people talked about the house, money, or land, they looked at him, not her. Even her kids, Selena and Diego, started asking Javier what to do. They stopped turning to Isabella, and it was happening so slowly she almost didn't notice until it was already too late. At first, Isabella tried to join a meeting about the vineyard. Felix, her husband, had worked hard on the vineyard for many years. Isabella gave an idea during the meeting. She said, maybe we can hire a new boss to help with the vineyard. Javier, her brother-in-law, smiled like a grown-up who is pretending to listen to a child. He said, maybe it's best if we let the experts make the decisions without even looking at her. Everyone else in the room just nodded and smiled. They moved on, like she hadn't said anything. Isabella sat back in her chair. Her words stopped. It felt like the walls of her life were closing in. This started to happen again and again. Whenever she spoke, Javier changed the subject. When she gave ideas, Javier gently told her they weren't right. In front of others, Javier never said anything mean directly, but he did little things, like looking away or changing the topic, that made everyone think Isabella was weak or couldn't do things on her own. Isabella started to wonder if maybe she was wrong. Was she being too emotional? Too unsure? Had she really become someone who couldn't handle things alone? Then came the night of the dinner. It was a Sunday evening. Felix used to love these little family dinners. Friends and neighbors came over. Everyone laughed and talked happily. That evening, Isabella wanted to share something special. She had painted a picture, a big painting of the ocean. She had worked on it for months. It showed the sea where she and Felix once went on vacation. She put the painting on an easel in the living room. She was nervous but excited. Maybe this would help her feel normal again. The guests came and looked at the painting. Some people said nice things. Isabella felt a small spark of hope. Then Javier laughed. That's the great thing about having free time, he said loudly, raising his glass of wine. Some of us are busy keeping things going, and others have time to paint waves. People laughed, not to be mean, but it still hurt. Isabella froze. The warm feeling left her body. She saw Selena give a small, unsure smile. Diego looked away. Their faces said so much without words. Isabella smiled a little, like she was okay, and walked to the kitchen. She stood there for a long time, looking at the food she had made. No one had touched it yet. The feeling of being hurt and embarrassed went deep into her heart. She realized something. She was disappearing. Not because someone was hurting her on purpose, but because people were treating her like she didn't matter. And she was letting it happen. That night, lying in the big bed she once shared with Felix, Isabella looked at the dark ceiling. She felt so alone. She didn't blame her children. They were young and didn't know what to do. They just wanted someone strong to follow. And Javier looked like that strong person. He gave them answers. He took control. But what did she have now? Just sadness and confusion. That thought made her feel even emptier. But then, under all the sadness and shame, she felt something else. Anger. Anger at Javier. But more than that, anger at herself. She had been through harder things before. She had built a good life. She had raised 2 wonderful children. She had stood beside Felix during tough times, and now she was letting herself become invisible. No more, she thought. The next morning, Isabella got up early. No one else was awake yet. She packed a small bag, just some clothes, her journal, and Felix's old sweater. Then she walked out the front door. She didn't leave a note. She didn't answer her phone when it started ringing later. She just drove, heading south, following the ocean. She wanted to find a place where other people's voices couldn't reach her. The road was long and quiet, but for the first time in weeks, Isabella felt something that wasn't sadness. She felt free. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew what she was leaving behind. A house that didn't feel like home, a family that didn't feel like hers, and a life that had been quietly taken away while she stood still. Somewhere ahead, past the pain and sadness, was the woman she used to be, the woman who didn't need saving. Not from Javier, not from her grief, not from anyone. She just needed to remember who she was. And she would remember. The road stretched out in front of her. She kept her hands steady on the steering wheel, her eyes on the road. Her chest ached with every mile she put between herself and the house. The morning sun shone through the car windows. It was bright and golden. The light showed the tiredness on her face. But she didn't play music. She didn't need a map. She just drove. She thought of memories. Felix laughing while fixing the porch swing, Selena's first steps, Diego running through the summer fields. These memories hurt, but she didn't turn back. Later that afternoon, the trees thinned and she saw the ocean. The air smelled salty. It reminded her of old summers and whispered promises. She remembered a tiny beach town where she and Felix had once stayed during a road trip. They had promised to come back someday when life got too hard. Now she was going there, without even meaning to. The town was smaller than she remembered. Just a few shops and houses by the sea. The buildings looked old and worn, but there was something strong and beautiful about it. She found a little inn behind a small cafe. Its sign hung crooked in the breeze. The woman at the front desk was old, with kind eyes. She didn't ask questions when Isabella wrote a fake name in the book. She just gave her a key. Isabella's room was small. The bed was a little lumpy. The air smelled like old things. But when she closed the door, she felt safe. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the carpet. She didn't move for a long time. The silence wrapped around her, but this was not the heavy silence of the big house. This was peaceful. Here she could cry, and she did. The tears came all at once. She cried hard, shaking all over. She cried for Felix, she cried for her kids. She cried for herself. When it got dark, she finally lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The next few days passed in a blur. Every morning, she walked through the misty town while it was still quiet. She didn't look at the people. She just pulled her jacket close and kept walking. At night, she sat by the window, listening to the waves. The sea crashed against the rocks again and again. The sound reminded her that the world would keep going, even if she felt broken. On the third night, she came back to her room after a long walk. She reached into her bag and felt something she hadn't noticed before. It was a small wooden box. Felix had given it to her long ago. "For memories," he had said. She pulled it out and opened it with shaking hands. Inside were photos, postcards, and Felix's old pen. At the very bottom was an envelope with her name on it, in Felix's handwriting. Her breath caught. She couldn't open it at first. Seeing his writing hurt so much, but slowly she opened the letter. It was dated a few weeks before he died. "Dear Isabella," it began. "If you are reading this, something has happened that we didn't plan. I don't want to scare you, but I need to tell you something. I'm worried about you. Not because you are weak, you are the strongest person I know, but because some people may try to take advantage of your kindness. Javier is not who he seems. I've seen his true self, and it scares me. I've taken steps to protect you and everything we built. I've moved all our money and property into a trust, something only you and the kids can use. Javier has no right to it. If he says he does, he's lying." Tears falling down her face. But these tears were different. They weren't the sad, hopeless tears of mourning. They were the strong, burning tears of waking up. Felix had believed in her. Felix had seen the danger she couldn't see. He trusted her to be strong, even when he couldn't be there with her. And now she would honor that trust. She carefully folded the letter and placed it back into the box. Wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater, Isabella sat quietly for a long time, feeling a new sense of determination building inside her. Javier and everyone else had underestimated her. They thought she was just a grieving woman, lost and broken. But soon, they would see. They would see the woman who was going to rebuild herself from the ground up. The next morning, Isabella packed up her things and checked out of the inn. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. She just gave Isabella a receipt and wished her good luck in a kind voice. Stepping outside, Isabella felt the cool morning air and the salty breeze. She breathed deeply, feeling a sense of freedom. She didn't have a clear plan, but she had something much more powerful: purpose. For the first time since Felix's death, Isabella smiled. It wasn't a fake or polite smile. It was a small, fierce smile that showed she was sure of what she had to do. No more running, No more hiding. She wasn't going to let anyone define her worth. It was time to take back what was hers. It was time to become the woman Felix always believed she could be. The journey back to the town was slow, but with each mile, Isabella felt like she was finding herself again. She kept Felix's letter close to her, tucked inside her jacket, where she could feel it close to her heart. His words had woken something deep inside her, something strong and steady. She was no longer the woman who had fled her home in tears. She was a woman on a mission. By the afternoon, she arrived in a bigger town that was busy enough to give her some privacy, but small enough not to attract attention. She found a simple motel between a gas station and a diner. Paying for a week's stay in cash, she settled into her room. It wasn't much, but it was safe. And for now, that was all she needed. The first thing she did was take out Felix's letter and read it again. She read every word carefully, memorizing the details. Felix had set up a trust in her name and in the names of their children. He had protected their future from anyone who might try to take it away. There was a lawyer he trusted, someone Isabella remembered meeting years ago at a family event. Felix had spoken highly of him, saying he was loyal and trustworthy. The letter also mentioned important documents, papers to help protect Isabella and her children's future. Felix had thought of everything, and Isabella felt thankful for him, knowing he cared for them even when he was gone. The next day, after a long night of thinking about what she needed to do, Isabella found a public library. She used a computer there to look up the law firm Felix had mentioned. She was relieved to find it still existed, and she called the number listed. A woman's voice answered, "Weston and Price Law Offices. How can I help you?" Isabella cleared her throat and said, "I'd like to make an appointment with Mr. Weston. It's about a trust my late husband, Felix Harper, set up." There was a small pause, then the receptionist said, "Of course, Mrs. Harper. Mr. Weston has been expecting your call. When would you like to come in?" Her heart skipped a beat at the words, "expecting your call." It meant Felix had really planned ahead, and this wasn't just a dream. They scheduled an appointment for the next morning. Isabella spent the rest of the day preparing. She organized the documents she had brought with her and made a list of questions she needed to ask. She couldn't afford to seem confused or lost. She had to show that she was in control and ready to protect what Felix had left for her and their children. That night, she sat by the motel window, watching the lights flicker from the gas station. She thought about her children, how much she missed them, but she knew she couldn't reach out to them yet, not until she was sure she could give them the truth and not more uncertainty. The next morning, Isabella dressed carefully. She chose a simple dark blue blouse and black pants. She braided her hair back and put on a little makeup to hide the tiredness in her eyes. She walked to the law office with Felix's letter in her purse. The office building was small, with green shutters and a sign by the door. Inside, it smelled like leather and old books. The receptionist, a kind young woman, smiled at Isabella and showed her to the waiting room. After a few minutes, a man came out. He looked older than Isabella remembered, with silver hair and a slight hunch. But his eyes were sharp behind his glasses. "Mrs. Harper," he said, holding out his hand. "I'm Clay Weston. It's good to meet you, even though it's under these sad circumstances." Isabella shook his hand firmly, feeling a little better already. They went into his office, a cozy room filled with shelves of legal books. Clay listened as Isabella told him her story. When she finished, he nodded and pulled out a thick folder from a locked cabinet. "Your husband was very careful," he said, opening the folder. "He knew there could be problems. He made sure we were prepared." Isabella watched as Clay laid out papers. They were copies of the trust, Felix's will, and instructions for how to manage everything. Felix's neat handwriting was on many of the papers. All the assets were transferred into a trust in Isabella's name and their children's names. Javier, her husband's brother, was excluded from everything. He had no legal claim. Isabella breathed a sigh of relief. Felix had truly protected them. But there was more. Clay reached into the folder and pulled out a second envelope. "Your husband also left a sealed letter for you," he said, his voice soft. "He left instructions for you if certain things happened." Isabella opened the letter carefully. Inside, Felix's familiar handwriting filled the pages. He warned her again about Javier. He said Javier might try to take control, especially in her grief. Felix told her to act fast and take back control before Javier could manipulate her. He told her not to doubt herself, reminding her that she was stronger than she knew. "You've always been the heart of this family," Felix had written. "Don't let anyone make you forget that." When Clay returned, Isabella was ready. Her voice was calm and steady as she told him what she wanted to do. She wanted to take immediate control of the trust, notify the right people, and make sure Javier couldn't access anything. Clay nodded and started making notes. "We can begin today. It will take time, but we'll move carefully." That afternoon, Isabella filled out forms and signed papers. It was tiring, but every time she signed something, she felt like she was taking back a piece of her life. By the time she returned to the motel, the sky had cleared and the stars were bright. She sat at the window looking at the documents spread out before her and smiled. It was a small, determined smile. This was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more truths to face, but Isabella wasn't running anymore. She was no longer hiding. Isabella Harper was preparing for a fight, and this time she wouldn't lose. Isabella walked out of the law office that day, feeling something different inside her. It wasn't the deep sadness that had been with her for weeks, but a strong feeling of determination, like a storm that was slowly getting ready to break. She carried a folder with important papers pressed against her side. It felt heavy, but also safe, like a shield that was stronger than any hug. Over the next few days, Isabella moved carefully and quietly. She went to banks and legal offices, making sure everything was in order. She changed account information, made sure all messages went only to her, and blocked anything Javier had tried to set up. With help from Mr. Weston, a trusted friend, Isabella made sure Javier couldn't do anything else he shouldn't. At first, Isabella was scared. She was just one person trying to fight against a man who had hurt her so much. But with each step she took, she felt stronger. Every paper signed, every password changed, and every call directed to the right people felt like she was building her protection. She knew she had to wait to reveal herself. If she showed herself too soon, Javier might make her look weak. No, she couldn't let that happen. She had to stay in the shadows, making everything right before showing her face. Isabella found a small, quiet apartment in a nearby town. No one asked questions there. She signed the lease using her maiden name and paid for several months in advance. She even set up a private post office box to keep her mail safe. Isabella kept her phone off most of the time, checking it only when she needed to. She didn't want to leave any clues that might lead Javier or her kids to find her. Her new apartment became her secret place. The dining table was covered with papers, copies of legal documents, lists of accounts, and important information. She made a timeline, keeping track of everything from the day her husband Felix passed away to all of Javier's wrong actions. At night, she wrote in a journal, telling Felix all about her feelings, her struggles, and the small victories she had. In her quiet space, Isabella began to heal and build herself back up. Days turned into weeks. Her hair grew longer and her face became stronger. She bought a few new clothes, simple but nice, which made her feel more confident. Isabella took long walks early in the morning when no one was around. It helped clear her mind. She also got updates from Mr. Weston. Javier had started to notice that things were changing. His access to money was cut off and no one was answering his calls. He got frustrated, even yelling at his staff. But Isabella didn't feel happy about it yet. She knew Javier would try even harder to take back control. Isabella couldn't rest. She had to stay ahead of him, always thinking about what he would do next. One evening, while sitting at her table, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her daughter, Selena. "Mom, where are you? We're worried." Isabella stared at the message for a long time. She wanted to reply, to tell her daughter she was okay, but she couldn't. Not yet. She had to stay strong. She set her phone down with a heavy heart, but her resolve stayed firm. Weeks passed, and Isabella kept working on making sure the estate was under her control. She changed the locks on the house, rerouted deliveries, and canceled services. Each small change made Javier's plans harder to carry out. She knew the time would come when she couldn't stay hidden any longer. Javier would try something too obvious, and that's when she would confront him, but only on her terms. One evening, while looking out the window at the storm, Isabella thought about the woman she had been when she first left the estate. She had been broken, afraid, and alone, but that woman was gone. Now she was stronger, built from the pain and betrayal she had gone through. She was no longer just a widow. She was a fighter, and the battle had only just begun. The next morning, Isabella met with a private investigator named Clara, someone who was known for her quiet work and ability to get things done. Isabella told Clara everything, and Clara listened without interrupting. When Isabella finished, Clara said, "We can help you. We'll gather all the proof you need." Isabella felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara's team found even more proof of Javier's lies and tricks. They discovered that Javier had been spreading rumors about Isabella, telling people she couldn't handle things while making himself out to be the only one who could help. It had worked for a while, but it wouldn't work anymore. Isabella put all the evidence together in a thick binder and kept it by her side. She wasn't ready to take Javier to court yet, but she needed to be ready. She knew the time would come when she had to show the truth. Until then, she stayed hidden, calm, and strong. Sometimes in the quiet of the night, Isabella would wake up feeling anxious. She would think about Javier's smug smile and Felix's steady hands. Sitting by the window, wrapped in Felix's old sweater, she would whisper promises to herself. "I'm coming home," she would say, "on my terms, and I will not be moved." As autumn arrived, Isabella stood in front of a mirror, looking at herself. The woman in the mirror was not the same person who had left the estate broken and scared. This woman was strong, confident, and ready for whatever was coming. She wasn't just a widow anymore. She was in charge of her own life, her own future. Javier wouldn't see her coming, but when she returned, he would feel her presence. One crisp morning, Isabella decided it was time. She packed up her things, putting her important papers and documents into a strong bag. She moved quickly but carefully. This wasn't a journey driven by anger. It was about doing what was right and bringing justice. The drive to the estate was long, but it felt shorter than she expected. The familiar roads led her back to the place where it all started. The estate looked the same, with its beautiful lawns and big trees. But Isabella knew that things weren't what they seemed. She entered the gate with a new code, one Javier didn't know, and drove slowly up the driveway. When she reached the house, she saw Javier standing on the porch, talking on the phone. He looked surprised when he saw her, his body freezing. Isabella stepped out of the car, moving slowly and calmly. She put her bag over her shoulder and closed the car door behind her, making a loud sound in the quiet morning. For a moment, neither she nor Javier moved. Javier quickly finished his phone call and came down the steps of the porch. He smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. "Isabella," he said, spreading his arms like he was welcoming her, but it felt fake. "We've been so worried. Where have you been?" Isabella didn't answer. She walked past him without saying a word. Her heels made a crunching sound on the gravel as she went up the steps to the porch. She could feel Javier watching her, like he was already thinking about how to take control again. Inside, the house smelled faintly like wood and expensive cologne. It was clean, but it didn't feel warm like it used to. There were no pictures of Felix, no gardening gloves by the door, and no little things that made the house feel like home. It was all gone, replaced by something cold and empty. Isabella walked into the living room and carefully placed her bag on the coffee table. Javier followed her inside, his face now serious. "We need to talk," Isabella said quietly. Javier laughed, but it was a harsh sound. "Of course we do. You've been gone for weeks. There's the estate." But Isabella interrupted him. "The estate is none of your concern," she said. Javier stopped talking, his face showing a quick flash of worry before he covered it with a fake smile. "I understand," he said in a softer voice. "You're upset. It's been hard for all of us. Let's sit down and talk about everything. We can figure it out." Isabella didn't sit down. She opened her bag and pulled out a binder. She placed it on the table between them, moving slowly. "I'm not here to figure anything out," she said. "I'm here to end this." Javier's face changed. He stepped closer to her, trying to look bigger and more powerful. But Isabella didn't move or flinch. She opened the binder and began laying out papers one by one. Copies of the trust, the will, records of money, and statements from lawyers and accountants. Javier looked at the papers, his face turning pale. He didn't know what to say. This doesn't change anything," Javier said, his voice rising a little. "You've been unstable, Isabella. Everyone knows it. The family?" "The family?" Isabella said, her voice sharp. "We'll see the truth." She pulled out the last paper, a copy of Felix's letter, which had been sealed, along with a statement from the people who had watched Felix write it, told her about Javier's plans, his greed, and how he had been dishonest. Javier stared at the papers, his face showing anger and fear. "You can't prove it," he said. "I don't need to prove anything," Isabella replied. "The papers speak for themselves. The accounts are safe. The house is in my name. The businesses are under new management. You have no power here." Javier opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He looked smaller, weaker. He wasn't the powerful man he had once been. Isabella gathered up the papers slowly and carefully, then looked up at Javier, her gaze steady and firm. "You will leave this house today," she said. "You will not come back. If you try to contact me or my children or get involved with the estate in any way, I will take legal action." For a moment, Javier stood there, his fists clenched. His mask of control cracked, and the angry, spoiled man inside showed. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed. "You think you can just erase me?" Isabella took a step closer, her voice soft but strong. "You erased yourself, Javier, when you chose to betray the people who loved you." Isabella turned away from him, walking to the front door and opening it wide. The sunlight flooded in, and Javier stood frozen for a moment, his eyes full of battle. Then, with a frustrated growl, he grabbed his coat and stormed past her, walking out into the yard. Isabella watched as he got into his car and slammed the door hard. The car rocked a little as he drove away, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. When the sound of his engine faded, Isabella gently closed the door. She leaned against it for a moment, her eyes closed. Her hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear. She was letting go of all the pressure she had been carrying. It was finally over. Javier was gone, and the house was hers again. Isabella felt like she might collapse from the rush of emotions, but she kept herself upright. She walked through the house slowly, touching everything that felt familiar. She went into the kitchen and ran her hand over the old wooden counter where Felix used to knead dough on Sunday mornings. She sat on the old leather sofa in the living room, breathing in the scent of home. Outside, the autumn wind blew the leaves across the lawn. The house felt different now. Not empty or sad. It felt peaceful. Isabella moved through the house, touching the familiar things until she reached the back porch. She stepped outside, taking a deep breath of fresh air. The garden Felix had planted was wild now, with vines growing everywhere. She smiled, her eyes a little wet with tears. She hadn't fought for the house or the money. She had fought for the life she and Felix had made together, for the home they had built with love and care. She had fought for herself, and she had won. Isabella stood alone under the wide sky, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. Not of Javier, not of grief, not of herself. She was home, and no one could take that away from her. The days after Javier left were quiet, and Isabella found this peace comforting. The house, once full of tension and secrets, now felt light. Every step she took felt easier. Every breath felt calmer. The rooms that had once felt like cages were now places to rest and heal. The first morning after Javier left, Isabella walked through every room. She opened windows that had been closed for too long, letting in the fresh autumn air. She took the white sheets off the furniture, watching the dust dance in the sunbeams like the house was waking up. In the living room, she found a box of photos she thought were lost. There were pictures of Felix smiling in the sun, of Selena and Diego as children building forts, and of Isabella herself when she was younger. She sat on the floor for hours, looking through the pictures and letting those memories come back. Outside, the garden Felix had planted was overgrown, the vines and weeds taking over. Isabella spent afternoons in the garden, pulling out weeds, trimming the vines, and using Felix's old gardening gloves. Sometimes she found herself talking to him out loud, telling him about her day, about the little victories she was having. The work wasn't easy, but it was healing. Slowly, she felt better inside. Then the children started reaching out to her. Diego texted her one morning, asking if she needed anything from the store. Later, Selena called, asking how she was. They didn't ask about Javier. They didn't bring up what had happened. Instead, they talked about simple things, the weather, the vineyard, the holidays. They were testing the waters, unsure if they were welcome again. Isabella answered their calls, listening more than talking. She let them find their way back to her, without pressure. It wasn't the same as it used to be, but it was real. One Saturday, Selena and Diego came over to the house. They each had a plant, like they were offering a new beginning. "We thought the garden could use some new life," Selena said softly. Isabella stepped aside and pulled them both into a tight hug. They spent the day together, planting flowers in the garden. At first, things were awkward, but by the afternoon they were laughing and enjoying each other's company. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. That evening, after they left, Isabella sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars come out. The air smelled like fresh earth and wood smoke. She thought about everything that had happened, the grief, the betrayal, the long climb back to herself, and felt a peaceful calm fill her. It wasn't the peace of someone who thought nothing bad would ever happen again, but the peace of someone who knew they could handle whatever came next. Over the next few weeks, Isabella rebuilt her life. She reopened the vineyard Felix had cared for so much. She hired a small team of people who shared her dreams of making the vineyard a place for family and community, not just for making money. She turned the old barn into a tasting room, hanging lights and placing pictures of Felix and their family. Javier had once dreamed of a life full of laughter, with friends and neighbors gathered together. He imagined families having fun picnics under big old oak trees, enjoying the simple happiness of sharing good food and drinks with good people. Isabella also started a small foundation in Felix's name. The foundation helped women like her who were not only facing sadness, but also the quiet pain that often came with it. She worked with local groups to give out scholarships, offer legal help, and provide counseling services. This work gave her life purpose and meaning, helping her heal from the pain she had been through. And while she was doing this work, Isabella also wrote. In the quiet hours before the sun came up, she filled many journals with her story. Not just the story of losing Felix and surviving, but the story of her love for him, the life they had built together, and the lessons they had learned. She wrote for herself, but also for her children, Selena and Diego. She wanted them to remember that surviving wasn't just about getting through hard times. It was about coming back stronger, about standing up again after falling down. As time passed, the seasons changed. The bright colors of autumn slowly gave way to the cold and quiet of winter. Then, bit by bit, spring began to bloom. Life, like the seasons, kept moving forward, and Isabella moved with it. One evening, almost a year after Javier had gone, Isabella stood again on the back porch. The vineyard stretched out in front of her, with the vines starting to grow again. The rosemary bush Felix had planted near the steps had made it through the winter. Its smell was strong and fresh in the cool evening air. Isabella closed her eyes, breathing deeply, letting the wind blow around her. It lifted her sweater and messed up her hair. She thought about Felix, but not with the sharp pain of missing him. Instead, she felt a deep, lasting thankfulness. He had trusted her to find her way. He had given her the tools she needed, the faith she needed to believe in herself, and the freedom to live her life. And she had done it. She had found her way back to being herself. When Isabella opened her eyes, she smiled, a slow, real smile that made her feel warm inside. This wasn't the life she had planned, but it was better. It was her life. She turned and walked back into the house, the screen door slamming softly behind her. The sound echoed in the quiet evening, like a promise. She wasn't broken. She wasn't lost. She wasn't waiting for life to happen to her anymore. She was living her life, fully, bravely, and without apology. No matter what came next, she was ready to face it. She wasn't the same woman she used to be. She had fought hard to become the woman she was now. The woman who had chosen herself. The woman who had found her way back home. The woman who was finally free. Thanks for watching. If you like the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.